All right, you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I've straddled this thing for years.
Okay, before we start tonight's meeting, I'd like to talk about our process. The meeting is being conducted in person as well as by phone and Zoom. This allows planning commission members and or public members of the public to participate in person or remotely. We will conduct a roll call to determine who is present. Throughout the meeting, we will call on individual planning commissioners to make sure that everyone has had a chance to be heard. We will conduct a similar process for comments from the public. Please wait until you are called on to offer comment and or testimony. If you'd like to speak, please submit a request in the chat function and wait to be recognized. We'd like to thank everyone for their understanding and patience. Minutes and audio recordings will be available on the Planning Commission website. Call this meeting to order. I call this meeting of the Crook County Planning Commission to order. Today's date is December 17th, 2025. Time is 4:05. People joining me are your Crook County Planning Commissioners. We are volunteers that have been appointed by the Board of County Commissioners to make up a diverse cross-section of the community. Planning Commission will consider the following agenda items. Continuation of deliberations on file 217-25-000233 PLNG-201. Appeal of 217-25-000233 PLNG. Number 2, planning or public hearing, record number 217-25-000-293 PLNG, application for telecommunication facility. Next is a roll call for Planning Commission commissioners, Kurt Giovanni.
Here.
George Pont.
Here.
Rita Steck.
Here.
Michael Warren's here. Les Williamson.
Here.
Hunter Newhart.
Here.
Laura Dill.
Present.
Bonnie Kurtz. Frank Hook. Will staff please indicate for the record with absences or excused or unexcused?
All commissioners are excused.
Is there anyone in the meeting room or participating remotely that wishes to address an item not on the agenda? If attending remotely, please enter a request to speak in the chat function. You have any? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, we will now mute the phone lines and all those who are not staff or commissioners, and we'll move on to the first agenda item. Continuation for deliberations. I want to clarify that I was not here for the original hearing of this. I have reviewed the information. So I will ask the applicant as we get to that point, if they have a problem with that, they can say so, but I have reviewed all that material. File number 217-25-000-233 PLNG 01, appeal of 217-25-000-233 PLNG Central Oregon Land Watch submitted appeal of administrative approval of a non-farm dwelling submitted by Kilpatrick Consulting LLC on behalf of Duke and Dana Settle. Subject property is addressed as 2901 Southeast Myrtlewood Lane and map tax lot number 18-1604-000-5300. Applicable criteria, the hearing is being held pursuant to Crook County Code 18.172 administrative provisions. Planning Commission will be evaluating the request against the following applicable criteria: Crook County Code Title 18, Chapter 16, the Crook County Comprehensive Plan, Oregon Administrative Rules, and Oregon Revised Statutes. Ex parte contact, conflict of interest, and bias. Do any of the commission members have a conflict of interest or bias to disclose?
No.
Has any member of the commission had any ex parte contact with the applicant or any member of the public regarding this matter?
No.
No. Okay. Commissioner should disclose if they had visited the site and state for the record any observations. Has anyone had a site visit?
No.
Are there members of the public or in person or participating remotely who wish to challenge any member of the commission? If participating online, please enter in a request to speak using the chat feature. Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll move on. We'll now proceed with staff's presentation.
That pulled up. Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, this is Katie McDonald, Senior Planner for Crook County. This afternoon, we have deliberations for the appeal for the settled non-farm dwelling. Go ahead and go into that. Central Oregon Land Watch and the applicant did submit additional material, rebuttal material, and final argument. The applicant has asked for alternate findings. This is something that may be new for some of the planning commissioners as to what alternate findings are. So they're a different set of evidentiary explanation that is going to lead to the same decision. So because the application was appealed on the wildlife density aspect and the applicant provided 3 wildlife density studies, the alternate findings reflect the different methodology of those. And you can choose one, you can do more than one, you can say it meets because of this under this finding, meets because of this under this finding, or it does or does not. Go ahead and go next. So when applying these, the 3 alternate paths that were presented by the applicant was Exhibit F, which was in the original decision, which excluded juniper acres from the acreage count for the total 1 mile study. And as it says, the rationale behind that was that Juniper Acres was a pre-existing rural residential subdivision that was platted prior to land use, should not be counted in the wildlife density. And Exhibit F1 was the broader wildlife density study. It was a 3 mile. It was argued that due to wildlife movement through large areas, that it was more representative of the habitat. Under both of those, that's okay. Under both of those studies, all 3 studies, the application meets the density. Under Exhibit F2, the 3rd density study, this is the Exhibit F2 that Central Oregon Land Watch and the applicant had come to a mutual agreement that they would, if the Planning Commission approved the application with this finding, Central Oregon Land Watch was amenable to it. And what that did is it included the Juniper Acres area. However, the applicant then did a hand count, hand verification through records and other means to identify that of the 52 address points that they're using on the GIS layer, that only 38 were dwellings. As you know, in order to get a building permit for solar, accessory structures, other things, there can be an address associated with a non-dwelling. So those are the 3 alternate findings, alternate paths. The Planning Commission has the ability through deliberations to talk about each one and to decide if they want to, how they want to proceed, if they would like to agree with staff and Exhibit F with the original. There was also the 3 mile and then the 1 mile, including Juniper Acres, but verification of the addresses. Should be one per- So this gives a little more information, the result, confirming the densities for each option. And that would be, you can, again, you can find that it meets all three under different circumstances. You can include all three. You can do one, you can do whichever direction planning commission decides to go through deliberations. One more slide. And then regardless of the methodology, those will get included into the finding. The total record would indicate that the proposal complies with the standards of the placement of the proposed non-farm dwelling would not destabilize local farming, so the farm impacts. The land is generally unsuitable as the crops, due to crop for the class 7 soils and lack of water rights, and that the residential density is within the 1 to 80, depending on which finding you wanted to pursue. And that is, there is a potential motion in the script to review as well for alternate findings. And that's all I have. If there are any questions.
Any question? Hold on.
Could you go back to F2, please?
F2?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes? It doesn't, either one. Yes. So the 1 mile that includes Juniper Acres, but a manually verified of dwellings rather than address points.
Okay, there were manual count said what, 38? I lost it again.
38. So it was at 68%
Okay,
total density.
okay. I just wanted to make sure I was looking at the right thing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for staff?
This is Marlo Dill. So to be clear on that, the 2 additional studies support the original findings.
All three, the dwelling meets the wildlife density standard.
Okay.
It's just different methodology on how they got there.
Any other question? Oh, George?
Ready for a motion?
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I move to uphold the administrative decision and approval of a non-farm dwelling for Duke and Dana Settle, record number 217-25000-233 PLNG, and deny the appeal of 217-25000-233 PLNG-01. This approval is based on the findings set forth in the staff report and material in the record, specifically incorporating alternate finding F2, the third one, because they're all, yeah, F2, to demonstrate compliance with Crook County Code 18.16.040, sub 7, and Wildlife Policy 2.
I'll second.
I further move that this approval be subject to the conditions of approval as listed in the decision.
I'll second that too.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Kurt?
Yeah.
George?
Aye.
Rita?
Aye.
Les?
Aye.
Hunter?
Aye.
Marlo?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Just so you know, I didn't have Marlo in my little script here, so that's why I was
Um,
here, but do you need that added?
Yeah, I think maybe another motion to sign the decision out of court or out
out of session.
of session. Sorry, old habits.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the chair be allowed to sign out of session.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Vote less.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Okay, before we start the public hearing, I'm gonna turn it over to Les. Les, this is Les's last planning commission meeting. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to recluse myself of this upcoming hearing. This month ends my 4th year. 4 years went by fast. And at the end of this month, I will be off the board. And I'm pretty sure this hearing is going to move on. And so I'm going to recluse myself. I didn't expect such a crowd for a send-off tonight. But I'm not moving on with another 4-year term, so I think it's best for me to recluse myself from this.
okay,
Chairwoman, Vice Chair Williamson, I just want to say Crook County greatly appreciates your service, and I do as well personally. So thank you very much.
yes, thank you.
Thank you. I will miss the group, and you'll see me out there on occasion. So I'll turn over the chair.
Okay, so with that, we have a pro tem that we are gonna have come up. Thank you. For circumstances like this. Shit.
I'm gone that easy.
I know, quick.
That's, shake your hands, your hands are full.
Oh, thank
See, let's, we got it.
My mess.
you.
There.
And during roll call, we had called Monty's name and he did apply. He was here. So for the record, now he's up here. The other thing I wanted to mention before we start this, we do have a lot of people here. This is the process. People come in, we talk about this. Please be respectful of other people. If people are talking, you may or may not agree with what they have to say. Let them have their chance. That's all I ask. So we can get through the process and do what we need to do. And it just makes it easier for everybody so that all can be heard. If you do have something to say, make sure you write it on the piece of paper that's out front and give it to Katie or Hannah, and then we will call on those. So, okay, we will now move to the second item on the agenda, public hearing for record number 217-25-000-293 PLNG, Thomas Alexander, owner, and ACOM Consulting, Inc. agent are proposing a telecommunication facility. This subject property is located on Southwest Williams Road, north of Highway 126, and is identified as map tax lot number 1514 1400000100. Applicable criteria. The hearing is being held pursuant to Crook County Code 18.172 administrative provisions. Planning Commission will be evaluating the request against the following applicable criteria: Crook County Code 18.16 exclusive farm use zones, EFU 3, Crook County Code 18.124 supplementary provisions, ORS 215.283, ORS 215.275, and Crook County Comprehensive Plan. Ex parte contact, conflict of interest or bias. Do any of the commission members have a conflict of interest or bias to disclose?
No.
No.
Mr. Chair, I live probably, I'm guessing about 10 or 12 miles from the proposed tower site. and I'm a customer of Visible, which is a subsidiary of Verizon. So theoretically, I suppose I could benefit from any improvements Verizon makes. But it will not influence my decision on this application.
Okay. So, yeah. Is that good? Okay. Has any member of the commission had any ex parte contact with the applicant or any member of the public regarding this matter?
I spoke with very momentarily with Mrs. Kingsbury when I delivered a load of sand, and I told her I was a planning commission member, but I did see that she wrote against it, so I just wanted to tell I told her keep it on the record and everything, but we did have a slight discussion about it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Nope.
Commissioner should disclose if they had visited the site and state on the record any observations. Has anybody been out there?
No,
I've been hauling rock out to Kellett and Carlin's and dumping it, and it's right where I've been working for about the last month.
Okay. Are there any members of the public or in person participating remotely who wish to challenge any member of the commission? If you're participating online, please enter in a request to speak using the chat feature. Nothing? Okay. So hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on. Order proceedings. Before we open for testimony, either in person or for those participating remotely, I want to remind everyone that all testimony must be directed to the applicable approval criteria and standards. No person may testify without first receiving recognition from the hearing authority and stating their full name and address. No person may present irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious testimony or evidence. Please do not repeat testimony. The commission may set time limits on oral testimony. Does any member of the commission wish to impose a time limit on testimony?
Mr. Chairman, due to the large amount of people here that might want a chance to speak, I'd like to limit it to 3 minutes per person.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So the time limit will be for 3 minutes. Failure to raise, excuse me. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence with enough detail to give the hearing authority and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with detailed specificity to allow the hearing authority to respond to the issue precludes the applicant from seeking actions for damages in circuit court. At the conclusion of the hearing pursuant to Crook County Code 18.172.081, Planning Commission may consider any request to continue the hearing or leave the written record open. We will start the hearing with staff's presentation. After that, testimony from any federal, state, or local agencies will be allowed. We will then offer an opportunity for the applicant to speak. Individuals in support of the proposal will then be heard, then those who are neutral to the proposal. Next, the appellant and any individuals opposed to the proposal will be heard. The applicant can then offer rebuttal. We'll now proceed with staff's presentation.
Good afternoon, John Eisler, Community Development Director. And are you able to pull the PowerPoint up? All right, so I know there's a lot to go over tonight, and a lot of people want to be heard. So my goal with this presentation is basically just to tee things up and to make sure that the Planning Commission understands the universe of criteria that we should be considering in this application. So Harmony Cell Towers application. Next slide, please. A very high-level summary of this. Harmony Towers and Verizon Wireless, the applicant are seeking to expand coverage in Crook County. Their stated objectives are to increase capacity along Highway 26 between Redmond and Prineville. to increase coverage. The residents, they state that the residents on the north side of Powell Butte report poor cell service, and they intend to remedy this with a 150-foot monopole with 9 panel antennas, 158 feet total. The auxiliary equipment, 3 equipment cabinets, and a backup diesel generator. Next slide, please. So this is in the application materials. This is just general drawings of what the tower will look like. Next slide, please. This is the site plan showing the other spaces intended to be leased and the equipment cabinets. General site plan. Next slide, please. This is a map provided by the applicant showing the location they are proposing and the other Verizon towers currently in existence. Next slide, please. This is a view as it is now, looking north on Williams Road. Next slide. This is what they envision the proposed tower will look like if it is constructed. Next slide, please. Quick overview of the timeline. The application was submitted August 28th, 2025, being complete and referred to the Planning Commission October 1st. Public notice was posted November 13th and mailed out November 26th. And this is the first hearing on the application tonight, December 17th, 2025. So, next slide. This falls under, it's in our county code, but it's also here in statute in ORS 215-283-1 sub C sub A. Uses permitted in exclusive farm use zones. The following uses may be established in any area zone for exclusive farm use. This is utility facilities necessary for public service, including transmission towers, not including transmission towers over 200 feet. A utility facility necessary for public service may be established as provided in sub A ORS 215-275. So this is everything that's in ORS 215-283 sub 1. These are known as the Brent-Mar uses, where the state basically establishes the criteria and the standards for which the proposal should be viewed. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is 215-275. A utility facility established. Oops. Utility facility established under 215-283-1CA is necessary for public service if the facility must be sited in an exclusive farm use zone in order to provide the service. Sub 2 reads, to demonstrate that a utility facility is necessary, an applicant must show that reasonable alternatives have been considered and that the facility must be sited in an exclusive farm use zone due to one or more of the following factors. If you'll humor me, I'm going to read a bit of case law. This is from the 2002 Sprint PCS versus Washington County decision. This was the Court of Appeals decision that dealt with an application such as this. So I'm reading starting at page 6. Actually, so we agree with LUBA that the provisions of ORS 215-275 strike the balance between the need to site facilities on EFU land and the need to preserve farmland. In McCaw Communications, we interpreted the phrase utility facilities necessary for public service in ORS 215-283-1D. At that time, ORS 215-275 had not been enacted, and as the Fritz's note, we concluded that in light of the goal of farmland preservation, the term necessary meant necessary to situate the facility in the agricultural zone in order for the service to be provided. ORS 215-275 codifies and gives further definition to our decision in McCaw. Subsection 1 of that statute restates almost verbatim the standard we announced in McCaw, and subsection 2 identifies what an applicant must show to establish that it is necessary to site the facility on EFU land. An applicant must show that reasonable alternatives to siting the facility on EFU land were considered, but that because of one of the 6 factors set out in paragraph 2A through 2F, it was necessary to site the facility on EFU land. Textually, the factors set out in ORS 215-275 sub 2 define when it is necessary to reject reasonable alternatives. Having identified those 6 factors as the bases for rejecting otherwise reasonable alternatives, the legislature implicitly precluded consideration of additional factors in deciding when utility facilities must be sited on EFU land. To the extent that the text of 215-275 is ambiguous, the legislative history resolves the ambiguity. ORS 215-275 was enacted to provide a uniform method for determining whether a public utility facility is necessary, as that term is used in 215-283. The 6 factors in ORS 215-275 sub 2 were intended to provide a roadmap to courts and county hearings officers for what they are to consider and what not to consider when defining necessity. The legislative history confirms what the text says. When deciding whether it is necessary to site a public utility facility on EFU land, local governments must analyze any alternatives based on 215-275. They may not import additional policy considerations into their analysis. So my purpose for reading that to you was that here on this slide, 215-275 sub 2, these are the factors we are to consider. Things like a reduction in the neighboring property values is irrelevant. Aesthetic concerns are irrelevant. Fitting into the community, everything else is irrelevant unless it's one of these. Unless you just need to look at, is the facility necessary? Does it further the goal of providing utility service? Is it necessary to be on farm ground? And one of these factors could those, these are the reasons why it needs to be on that site. Easier this way. Okay. Did you hear me, Hannah? Do I need to repeat?
Be good if you could.
You guys hear me?
No.
Should I start at the beginning?
Start over.
Sorry, I'll speak directly into this mic. There we go. So these are factors to consider. So a summary of the test. Next slide, please. So as I was saying, the test is, do the applicants' defined objectives further the statutory purpose of providing utility service? Second question is, have reasonable non-EFU alternatives been considered? Number 3, have all of the alternatives been ruled out by one or more of the ORS 215-275 sub 2 factors? This is a complicated application. There's going to be a lot of comments. This is what I want you to put your blinders on and focus on. This is what the reviewing authorities, LUBA and the Court of Appeals, will consider when they review the decision, if it does happen to get appealed. Next slide, please. And so the first question, do the applicants' defined objectives further the statutory purpose of providing utility service? Next slide. As stated, the defined objectives are to increase capacity along Highway 126 between Redmond and Prineville, to expand coverage to the Palo Butte community, and to provide communication service infrastructure to support emergency response, law enforcement, fire protection, and medical services. Next slide, please. Number 2, have reasonable non-EFU alternatives be considered? Applicant will provide this material on their presentation. I assume this is on the record, but next slide, please. So this is their map. That's the proposed location there in the middle. The alternatives there are numbered 1 through 5. And I'm just going to walk you real quick through the application materials, what the applicant stated. So next slide. This is alternative 1. This would be co-locating on the Sprint American Tower. It's a 196-foot lattice tower. The applicant states that this location would provide reduced coverage versus the proposed site, and it would not provide offload to the neighbors east and south. Next slide, please. This is alternative 2. This is in the Palo Butte 20 zone, and the applicant states that this would provide reduced coverage versus the proposed site, is too close to the neighbor sites to the south, and it will not provide coverage to the north. Next slide, please. Alternative 3, the R5 zone. The applicant states this will provide reduced coverage versus the proposed sites, is too far north, and it will not provide offload to the south. Next slide, please. Alternative 4, southeast of the R5 zone. The applicant states this would provide reduced coverage versus the proposed site, is too near existing facilities. It will not provide coverage to the north and will not fulfill the project's technical requirements. Next slide, please. Alternative 5. This is in our rural service center zone. The applicant states this will provide reduced coverage versus the proposed sites and not provide the needed service to the north. Next slide, please. So the applicant stated their reasoning there, but so this would be the final test you guys consider. And the public or someone with testimony is also able to provide alternative additional sites that they propose, but have all of the alternatives that are not on EFU ground been ruled out by one or more of the factors of 215, 275, sub 2. That's the test. Next slide. And again, there are the alternatives that the applicant choose from in order to disqualify any of those reasonable alternatives. Next slide. And that's it. Are there any questions?
One question, what does offload mean?
That'd be a great question for the applicant to explain what that process means as far as capacity goes to serve customers. There's material in the application that provides a grocery store line analogy that they may share with you again.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Okay. Yes.
Question, test one, it says is to provide service between Redmond and Prineville. But all of the other things talk about going north, which is like out where George lived. So is Redmond considered north? It would.
It's a great question for the applicant.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Is there anything else that you just wanted to get through the presentation briefly and
Yeah,
then,
just wanted to tee it up. The parties are going to have a lot to say.
okay,
One last thing I will note is in the application materials, the one thing that's hanging out there is the security agreement, the decommissioning and the security when the site's finally done, that'll be removed properly. That hasn't been completed yet, but that's typically something we can do in a condition of approval. So basically, it needs to be finalized and in our hands before we issue building permits.
okay.
Another question?
Yes.
You mentioned security when it's said, done. Is there such a thing involved that I missed in reading about a decommissioning? Does that happen like it does with solar things?
My understanding is yes. That's one of the criteria that we have in.
Apparently I didn't read thoroughly enough, but that was something that popped into my head.
Yeah, let me.
Okay.
So that's in the staff report. It's in the 18124 stuff. Hang on, let me get to it. It's at sub J, an agreement and security in accordance with Crook County Code 1740080 and 1740090. There's the same provisions we use for our solar facilities. For removal and support structure and any ground-based equipment or accessory structures such as equipment buildings and security fences.
Okay.
Yeah, John, we talked about the military airspace overlay last time. How's that just gonna be affected by that?
That is in the eastern part of the county, and so this would not affect that.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, do we have any agencies here that want to,
No, go
you have
ahead.
another question?
No.
I'll let you.
Well, yes, I do. You said agencies, that jogged my memory. Are any county agencies involved in this other than maybe the road department? I mean, are they commenting?
No,
Okay. Thank you.
this doesn't like there's no wildlife concerns. There's no It would obviously go through the same process with the fire department and road department, road approach and all that, but otherwise, no.
Okay. So do we have any agency personnel that wants to speak on this in the audience or online? If one's online, you know of anybody? Okay, if you are online and from an agency and wish to speak on this, I need you to request that in the chat. Okay, I guess none. All right, so we'll have the applicant come up. And just state your name and address for the record.
Can everybody hear me well enough? I'm told that I talk very loud in my household, so I'm assuming I'll be okay. Thank you, Chair Warren, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Mike Connors. I'm an attorney at Hathaway Larson. Address is 1125 Northwest Cooch Street, Suite 550, Portland, Oregon 97209. I also have a PowerPoint presentation that I'll go through quickly. I think staff did a good job of covering some of this, so I'll try to the extent there's duplication, get through that quickly. And then after I speak, Stephen Kennedy, who's the radio frequency consultant engineer on this project, will go through a presentation. Those are kind of get to the key criteria that you need to consider under the utility necessary for public service requirements. And then also online is Paul Slaughtermaker from ACOM Consulting. He's the site acquisition consultant. He's not planning on doing a presentation, but I just want to let you know that he is available if there are any questions, and I may refer to him if there's any questions that I don't know of. We can go to the next slide, please. So the subject property that we're looking at is near 3450 Southwest Williams Road. It's close to the road there. That property is approximately 67 acres and it's zone EFU. And the facility that we're looking at, as I indicated earlier, is located very in close proximity to Williams Road. Next slide, please. This just gives you a general idea of the proposed site surrounding area. I don't know if you can see that green dot in the middle. That's the subject property, approximate location for the tower. Next slide, please. So what we're proposing is a 150-foot monopole tower with an overall antenna tip height of 158 acres. The original design for this was a lattice tower. That's kind of one of those triangular type of towers. We heard loud and clear from the community that there was concerns about visual impacts. And to try to address those, we changed the design to a monopole. So it's more of a slim pole with the antennas at the top, have less of a visual impact. It's most appropriate kind of design for this kind of particular site. I know there was a lot of concerns raised about potential FAA, ODA, aviation lighting. There is no lighting that's required. And we have letters from both FAA and ODA confirming that fact. And then there'll be a ground equipment area. It's a roughly 50 by 50 ground equipment area. It'll be fenced with outdoor equipment cabinets, an emergency generator, and there'll be 9 antennas at the top of the monopole. Next slide, please. So this is a coverage and capacity site. So the coverage area, there's what we call in the industry a significant gap in coverage in the Powell Butte community towards the north. And that's kind of what we generally understand when there's not very good cell service, that there's an area that's not getting very good coverage. So if you're in it, you're going to get no or poor reception, and that's going to get worse depending on whether you're outside in your car or in buildings. But it's also a capacity site, and the capacity portion of it relates to Highway 126. When I use the term capacity, what I mean is there's data that's going through these towers and being projected to the next tower going down the line. And as we all are using, more people are using cell phones. We're using it for more purposes. It used to be just for phones, then became email, then became internet. All that data is having to run through the towers. At a certain point, each tower can only handle so much data. So when the existing towers, and there are existing towers in this area, get overloaded with data, you need to add a new tower that can offload. That's where that term offload goes. Mr. Kenny will probably do a much better job of explaining it, but that's kind of the layperson's explanation of what we mean by coverage and capacity. And this one is both because we have these poor reception areas to the northern part of Powell Butte, and we also have the existing towers being overloaded, so there's some slowness as a result of that. And it does, just as a reminder to people, it's not just what we're doing in terms of calling, emailing, and using the internet, but it's also part of the critical communication services emergency, that if there's ever any kind of an incident, you want to make sure that you have coverage in all areas and that you have sufficient capacity to accommodate all that traffic. And this is one of those things, as we increase the amount of data that we're using, is only going to get worse over time. So that's the purpose for trying to address this capacity issue at this site. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of the current coverage, red being the worst, yellow being next, and green is what we're really looking to get. And I don't know if you can see it very well, but in the very middle, there's like a little black dot. That's the site. And this is an example of what the current coverage is. Next slide, please. And this is the coverage that will be provided by this particular tower. So as you can see, it goes from a predominantly yellow area to green, which is what we're looking for, as that capacity is, considered acceptable or good good coverage. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Eisler explained, this is a utility facility for public service. It is governed by state law. Applicants are permitted to go up to 200 feet. We're only proposing 150 feet with a 158-foot antenna. And as Mr. Eisler explained, they're exclusive approval standards. And for these particular kinds of facilities, it's really governed by state law. State law requires that we address these standards and limits the ability for local standards to apply. So I think Mr. Eisler did a really good job of sort of walking you through what those are. In its simple form, really what we have to demonstrate is that there's a need for the facility and that we've considered alternative non-EFU sites. And the key there is the need for it really goes to the need for the coverage and capacity, which Mr. Kennedy will go into in greater detail. And the consideration of alternative sites, it's limited to non-EFU sites. So it's not other EFU zone sites, it's non-EFU zone sites. Next slide, please. So here, just kind of covered that first point that we have to address, looking at the need and non-EFU alternatives. And in this case, we really looked at two types of alternatives. First type being existing telecommunication towers in the area to see whether it would be possible to co-locate our antennas on those already existing facilities to serve this need. And then the second type of alternative sites that we considered are non-EFU zone properties within the area. Next slide, please. And I won't go into this in great detail because Mr. Kennedy will cover this. But there are basically three existing towers that we looked at. The first one is the Sprint tower that we evaluated to see whether we'd be able to co-locate on it. The other two are existing Verizon towers. It's very unusual for an applicant to be able to use an existing tower because typically just adding more antennas is not going to necessarily serve the purposes that you're looking for with a new site. But we did evaluate those because those were in, the realm of proximity to see whether adding antennas would resolve the issues that we were having. And for a variety of reasons, none of them did. I know some people, would obviously prefer that we go on an existing tower. I just want to emphasize the fact that if we could, that's always our preferred alternative because that's not something that goes through a public process. It's far cheaper. We have an existing tower. We just have to put our antennas on there versus having to hire consultants, find a site, file an application, go through a public process. And often these applications are controversial. So for whatever that's worth, I can just tell you that to the extent that there would be any potential for us to be able to co-locate on an existing tower, that would definitely, we'd have a selfish motivation to do so. But unfortunately, none of the options that we evaluated will address either the coverage or capacity concerns. Next slide, please. And so we looked at, once we ruled out co-locating on existing tower, we looked at alternative non-EFU zone properties. And in evaluating alternative sites for a new tower, you have to consider a few things. One is it needs to be near the search ring area, and the search ring area is where an RF engineer basically says, here's where the problem is. Here's kind of a general area where we need a tower located. So you kind of, it's locationally dependent. So we'll look in that area. We have to find one that can satisfy our coverage and capacity objectives for the site. We have to have a willing property owner who's willing to lease space for siting a new tower, and then it has to be large enough, be able to satisfy like setback requirements, one of the big ones that apply. And so in this case, the subject property is surrounded predominantly by other EFU properties, but there were 4 non-EFU zone properties that we considered, and none of them worked. And Mr. Kennedy will address that in greater detail. Next slide, please. This just gives you an idea. So the green is the EFU zone property, and then the other 3 colors that you can see there are non-EFU zone property. This just gives you a perspective, and the stars where our particular site is. Gives you an idea of how much EFU property there is surrounded here. So when we're looking at non-EFU alternatives, they're a fair distance from the particular site that we're looking at or proposing as part of this application. Next slide, please. And so again, these are the 4 alternatives. Just in the interest of time, because I know we got a lot of people, I'll go ahead and let Mr. Kennedy address those. But this just gives you a kind of a summary of the reasons why we determined that those non-EFU alternative sites would not satisfy our objectives for this site. And I'll let Mr. Kennedy address that in greater detail. Next slide, please. So as you've seen with the county staff report, county staff has reviewed the application, reviewed all the comments from the residents, and they've concluded that the applicant as it currently sits right now satisfies all the approval criteria. There are some proposed conditions that staff has recommended in their staff report. We're okay with all those conditions, including the condition related to the decommissioning and security agreement, which is not too uncommon. And that's just to assure that if at any point the tower becomes no longer useful, there's some assurance that it will be taken down and there is a security bond in place to be able to pay the cost if an applicant weren't to do that. Next slide, please. We know that there have been a lot of comments from the neighboring community. We had a neighborhood meeting, heard those comments there. A number of comments have come in. And these particular applications are always really tough because I think most, if not all of us in this room use a cell phone. Having good cell coverage is something that we all expect and need. And so there's a desire to be able to serve that. But of course, when you put a tower up, just like any kind of utility, people that are in closer proximity or impacted by it are not going to be happy about it. I wish that there was a way that we could do these that wouldn't have any impact on anyone. And maybe in the first build out of the wireless network, there were some of that because you could kind of cherry pick spots. But now with so much of the infill that's necessary, it's really hard to find sites in these very discrete locational areas to be able to serve your coverage and capacity objectives without having some neighbors in the proximity that are going to be impacted by it. So we sympathize with it. Hopefully people will understand we have limitations on what we can do in order to be able to achieve our objectives. But just kind of going through quickly some of the comments that we saw to give you some sort of quick responses to some of those comments. There were some comments about coverage being adequate, which I understand. It comes up at every hearing. People say, hey, I'm a Verizon customer. I have okay coverage, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. It doesn't really address the capacity that way. What we did provide is very extensive RF or radio frequency evaluations that sort of talk about here's the existing conditions, here's what the conditions will be with the new tower, and sort of explain what some of the problems are. That's all evidence in the record that's based on from these RF consultants, expert evidence that we believe satisfy that criteria. There's also the capacity issue. Just because you may have coverage doesn't mean that at times when there's an overload on the system that you're going to have some difficulty. And one way of thinking about it, because I understand everyone's always got a little bit of suspicion. Why is this applicant doing it? What's the motive behind this? There really would be no other reason we would be here if we didn't have a coverage or capacity issues. Now, these towers are not profit centers, they're cost centers. We don't get any additional revenue out of it. It's really solely for purposes of ensuring that our customers and the community has the proper coverage that they need. And so Verizon will invest in some of these towers to ensure that. But that's the reason that we're doing it here. And so understand that some people may not have coverage issues, but we think the evidence in the record, especially the RF expert evidence, is sufficient to demonstrate that there's a need for the facility. And like I said, from a motivation standpoint, there would be no reason for us to be here otherwise. There were some concerns about health, safety, and environmental impacts. Understand where those concerns come from. It's not relevant under the state criteria, but there's also a federal law, Federal Telecommunications Act, that basically prohibits local bodies or anybody from considering RF health-related impacts. And the reason for that is if you just think about like wireless coverage, wireless networks, it's a national infrastructure. So Congress decided that their national standards needed to be adopted so that carriers could go out there and build out this utility network. If we had different standards in every single local jurisdiction, it would be impossible to do. So whether you agree with it or not, that's what they adopted as part of the Federal Telecommunications Act, is a prohibition on considering health, environmental safety concerns, but requiring carriers to satisfy the federal requirements and provide evidence to that effect, which we have. We've submitted evidence on that issue. There were some concerns about property value impacts. Again, that's not relevant under the state law criteria that applies to this application. And I know that there's a lot of perception about impacts on property values, but as is common the case, there's no specific evidence, I think, in the record to support that. So again, I understand people may have that fear, but I've been doing this kind of work for probably 20 years, and I have yet to see towers being built and some of the fears that people have of the impact on community and them not being able to losing value in your houses. I haven't personally seen that happen for whatever that's worth. Probably not a lot. I acknowledge that. And then the other big one is visual aesthetic impacts. Again, although it's not relevant under the criteria, the approval standards before you, we are sensitive to the community concerns on this issue. These are our customers. So Verizon attempts to do what it can to try to accommodate those issues. So in this case, even though it's not relevant, not required, we did change it from a lattice tower to monopole standard design tower, as I indicated earlier, so it have sort of a slimmer view to it, less of a visual impact on the area. And then the last thing I'll say is that although I understand there's no doubt that this is going to have a visual impact, I don't mean to suggest that it won't. But I do think that it may not be as bad as some people fear. And part of that may be because they saw the original lattice design and got really concerned, a monopole design. But if we can go to the next slide, I just pulled some of the photo simulations that we submitted into the record just to show people. Clearly the tower is visible, but as you can see, there are other utility poles in the area. So there are already some similar kind of visual impacts that are in the area. Next slide, please. Similar here, further back, there's other poles in the area that I think there are already existing visual impacts. This will add to it, but my personal opinion, don't think it'll be quite as bad as people fear. Next slide, please. Similar there with kind of showing utility poles and the proximity with the tower. Next slide, please. And this is one where the utility poles aren't there, but it's a little bit further away, just to give you an idea that the further you are from the tower, it's really going to be less of a visual impact, as tower being a monopole. It's going to be difficult to see the further back you are. Next slide, please. And a similar point here about this one even further back, less visible from this vantage point. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, again, state law establishes the exclusive approval standards. And we believe that we've demonstrated compliance with those, that there is a need for this to both satisfy our coverage and capacity objectives here. We did consider multiple alternatives, both co-locating on existing towers and looking at non-EFU zone properties. And as we explained in the record, Mr. Kennedy can provide more information. None of those are able to satisfy either the coverage or capacity objectives for the site. And as you've seen in your staff report, staff has reviewed this and at least determined that we've satisfied the approval standards and propose those conditions, and those conditions are acceptable to us. So I'm sure we're going to hear some more community comments tonight, and we can address those, I believe, in our rebuttal piece of it. But now I'd just like to ask Mr. Kennedy to come up, and he's just going to focus on the need for this tower and then why it is that those alternative options that we looked at won't work for us. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Kennedy to come up. Unless you,
Before you go,
yeah, absolutely.
Questions?
go ahead, George.
So FAA and state aviation aren't requiring lights.
Correct.
So there will be no lights on the tower?
Correct.
Okay. Would you be okay with the condition of approval stating that?
Yes, I guess the only caveat would be unless FAA or ODA later determine that would be required. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we
Okay.
can't, override that. But I can double check with my client, but I'm sure that that would be an acceptable condition because the lights are solely for FAA, ODA, not for us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, can I please ask you to try to speak into the mic so everyone can hear us? Thank you.
Mr. Connor, when your first slides, you were talking about the facility and it was going to be originally a lattice tower.
Correct.
And then you switched it to monopole, which was the one in the picture, which was my question I was going to ask you if that picture was a monopole. When you originally brought this up to the Powell Butte community, was it to be a lattice tower?
It was.
Okay. So it's not anymore.
It's not anymore. And then, the lattice tower is usually the typical proposal that we make. From a structural standpoint, from a cost perspective, it's the best option. And it's usually what we start with. When we hear a lot of community concerns, irrespective of what maybe we are required to do, both Verizon and Harmony Towers will look at alternatives to try to address those concerns. In this case, the monopoles, in our opinion, the best option from a visual impact standpoint. So that's why we changed the design to the monopole.
And you made that change for the benefit of the people that had concerns.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Just to kind of follow up on hers. So can you give us kind of a perspective? Lattice was how wide compared to the monopole being how wide?
Oh
Rough-
boy, I don't know the dimensions on that, but basically a lattice has a base four base points that kind of come up in a triangle. So it's sort of providing more structural support that is spread out. And then it gets a little bit more tailored as you go, whereas a monopole is just like a utility pole. It's a
Okay,
single pole that goes up.
okay. Any other questions for Mr. Connor? Okay, so whoever you want to.
Yeah, I'll have Mr. Kennedy, and I appreciate your time.
Bring up the one titled RF justification.
And go ahead and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Steve Kennedy. I'm 18756 West Luke Avenue, Litchfield Park, Arizona. I'm an independent radio frequency consulting engineer. I've been designing wireless networks for 35 years. I've designed sites across the United States and in other parts of the world and also done satellite. I was hired to come in and review what the Verizon engineer came up with on their design and what they were going through. So I did some independent analysis. Yes, ma'am, this is it. So I have a lot to go through. I will try to go as fast and easily as I can. I geek out on this stuff, so I like talking about it, but not everybody else does. So I'm going to try to use some everyday analogies to kind of talk about this stuff and explain it. And I'm going to try to go as fast as I can. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Let's go next slide. So why carriers build sites? Two reasons: coverage, capacity. Coverage is the ability for the transceiver in this cell phone to talk to the transceiver on the site and have a constant signal without that signal dropping and having enough signal to provide the level of service needed. That's coverage. The second is capacity. Capacity is the ability to provide throughput or bandwidth. So we go to the next slide. There's a way to explain capacity. Capacity, I use an analogy called the water pipe analogy. Water pipe analogy is in the ground, in a housing addition, there's a water pipe. Everybody taps onto that pipe to get water. If only one person tapped that pipe, they would get 100% of that pipe's capacity, or all the gallons per minute. If another person taps, they each get 50. 2 more taps, everybody gets 25. 4 more taps, everybody gets 12 and a half. So the gallons per minute per user lowers the more people that tap that line. Okay, so that's basically what's the concept is on a radio channel. The more users tapped onto a radio channel, finite thing, that water pipe only has specific amount of gallons per minute. The radio channel only has throughput or megabits per second, right? So there's a limit, and the more people that attach, the less water or throughput bandwidth per user there is. That's capacity. That's offload. Okay, that's the main reason for this site. So it's going to provide offload to the surrounding sites, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The second thing is provide coverage. And a lot of us have a cell phone. They're everywhere. 57% of American homes rely exclusively on cell phones, and then 84% of 911 calls are made from cell phones. Next slide. Proposed site, we went through it. We can go to the next slide. Okay, why here? Surrounding area has lack of quality services. Okay. Once again, we get to that coverage and capacity thing, but we're more into the capacity. All 3 carriers are lacking service. I've got some crowdsourced data showing it. There's significant growth in the rural sides of these networks in Oregon, and sites to the south are overcapacitated. I mean, that water pipe has too many users attaching to them, so there's too little bandwidth per user. And existing Verizon neighbors do not provide adequate coverage where the proposed site is located. Slide. There's a proposed site. Next slide. All right, the distance are all the Verizon neighbors. So the neighbors to the south, they're the guys that are having some problems. We've got a little bit of issues on the sites to the west, a little bit of issues on the site to the east, as there's a lot of traffic on the highway. So there we go. We put a site right in the middle. Next slide. All right, this is Cell Mapper. It's showing that this is where existing mobiles. So those of us that have mobiles, they'll be reporting some of this data. And so it's coming straight from the phone into the servers, and it's saying, hey, if I'm seeing dark green, orange, or red, I'm not getting as good a quality service as I should be getting because the phones are reporting low quality. All right, so we can see up in the area where the proposed site is, this is the area where that would be impacted by the proposed site. Next slide. Okay, this is a propagation modeling tool. This is a pretty standard piece of software that every carrier uses. It's called ATOL, and what it does, it does a lot of math. And it takes into account, okay, if I'm going to put a dipole in the air, I'm going to put a specific frequency on that dipole at a specific power. It's going to propagate or cover a particular area. And it looks at terrain. It looks at the types of things that are being built. Is this like downtown Phoenix? Is this downtown Portland? Or is this rural area like it is here? It takes into account what types of buildings. Are they all cement block? Are they bricks and sticks? What's being built? What's going on in the area? And this model takes all this into account and does all this math and comes up with what the coverage is. So green is for a 95% probability we will have indoor coverage. So the mobile will be able to receive a quality level signal with the signal passing through the walls and being able to get to that mobile. That's that coverage aspect. So that's the green area. The yellow is an in-vehicle. You're in your car, you've got windows, piece of steel, you're not quite as covered. You're not quite as got as much stuff blocking the RF signal because you have windows surrounding you. So that site's going to have a little slightly better coverage area for mobiles versus the indoor. And we have red, that's on street. You're in your front lawn, you're mowing, your phone rings, you're working on your garden, or you're out farming, you can get access out in there. So this is what the current coverage level shows based on the existing sites. Next slide. We can show that when we propagate that new site, we see that we get a lot more indoor services than we had before. Next slide. Okay, best server, this is where who is covering what. So it looks kind of like I went crazy with the Big Chief and crayons, but what happens is each set of antennas on that area cover an area. So let's say I have a 120-degree beam. I imagine our eyes, I'm seeing you right now. This is my coverage area. So I'm going to provide that level of service. Back behind me, I can't see. Same thing with the antennas. They point a particular direction, provide a level of service. Well, as those antennas point, let's say that the light blue area and the green area, those are being covered by site to the east from the southeast and the southwest. So those are the two sites that are over capacity because they're providing most of the service in that area. Right. So remember we talked about the water pipe analogy. Those two guys are providing the water pipes to that area and they've got too many users on them. So we go to the next slide. Now we see that we've seen new colors from the new antennas on this new site. It starts to provide that level of service in those areas. So we added new water pipes into the area for the users in that physical geographic area. So that's the offload. That's why it's being done. We talk about coverage. People say, hey, I've got great coverage. Yeah, but the network's over capacity, right? The throughput per user is too low. That's why we have to add an additional site. Next slide. All right, this is coverage area zoomed. So I just wanted to do this where I brought in Google Earth and I put the propagation into Google Earth so you could kind of see a little bit more of the lay of the land of what's going around the proposed. Next slide. And then this is the proposed coverage. So just a little bit difference, a little bit more zoomed in versus the other ones. And you can see some more streets and a little bit more detail. Next slide. Okay, so this is AT&T. I always look at the other guys. They've got 3 sites. And we go to the next slide. So they're providing about the same level, a little bit less quality service within the same area. So those AT&T mobiles are reporting the same thing. So they're not getting as much coverage as they need. But once again, there's coverage and there's capacity. This is a capacity site. It's the throughput's the impact. Next slide. Okay, this is T-Mobile. They're in about the same places as AT&T is. Take a look at it. Next slide. Just once again, we get the same thing, and actually to the southwest, T-Mobile's in really poor shape. But it's mobiles and T-Mobile are reporting the same thing. Next slide. So poor service along Southwest Williams Road and Dixon, as well as all feeders. A lack of throughput, right? Throughput and quality along Highway 126 north and south. Those 2 sites to the south and a little bit to the east and west, they are overloaded. That's why we need capacity. We need throughput. Existing sites are over capacity. Other carriers have the same level of service, actually a little bit less than Verizon within the area. Recommended approval. Okay, let's go look at the alternative site analysis. Okay, all right, let's go to first page. So I was tasked to review all of the other sites. Mike already talked about them a little bit. You guys saw them when your development director talked about them. So reviewed the other locations. Sprint Tower is the only existing structure, which is 4.28 miles on a proposed bearing of 100 degrees from the proposed. Primary objective was to provide the coverage and offload like we talked about. Next slide. Distance neighbors, we already saw that. Next slide. All right, there's the Sprint site. We kind of already saw that information, the coordinates, ground elevation, height. Next slide. Where all the other types of zoning or types of land use development, that's the ones I ran. There's all the coordinates. Next slide. So these same slide as your development director put up. So these are the locations that came up. So what happens in this slide is that green box. I told the propagation model, I want you to do some extra math in this area. I want you to tell me who's doing what in this area relative to coverage levels, who's doing what relative to the capacity. And so when it did the propagation modeling, it within this specific square, it did some more math for me. Math that I couldn't do, it does a whole lot faster. Next slide. So when I did that, so we're looking at, if you look at the upper left, that's the proposed site turned on, right? And that's the one that we're applying for. And if you look at the lower right, that's the existing coverage. So what I did was I said, okay, so let's look at the proposed site, what it's going to do compared to now. And then I compared the proposed site versus each one of the alternate sites to get a percentage. So we're getting 33.59 square kilometers covered with indoor service with the proposed site. Currently within the area, that green box where I did the extra math, currently it's not showing any coverage for indoor. It's just going with the indoor, in-vehicle and outdoor services. Next slide. So here's the first one. This is the Sprint Tower, the ATC tower. So if I run that one in the upper left is the proposed, the lower right is the alternate, we're seeing a 20% reduction in coverage for the area where the proposed is going to be. So that site would do 20% worse offload coverage probability within the area of what we need. That's why that Verizon engineer designed the search ring where he did. Next slide. This is the PRB 20. This was a 34% reduction. So upper left is proposed, lower right is the PRB 20, location 2. And we show what it did, and it was a 34% reduction in coverage compared to the proposed. Next slide. Okay, the third one was R5NW. So, well, that one did well relative. It was only a 16% reduction. It didn't do anything for down towards the south, towards the highway, like the proposed does. Next slide. Number 4, R5 Southeast, it was a 54% reduction in coverage as compared to the proposed. Next slide. Number 5, RSC South, that was a 47% reduction in coverage as compared to the proposed. And the next slide. So basically, wrapping it up, trying to keep eyes from glazing over, the proposed site does more of a job covering and offloading those 2 sites to the south and the sites to the east and west than any of the alternate sites that were brought up. So the proposed does the best job. Okay, next, let's move on to our drive test. Yep. Okay, so here's the drive test. So I made a visit out here a few months ago, and I brought my test gear with me, and I just certify that I'm the one that did the drive, and I'm the one that has the test gear. So when I go to the next slide. So what I do is I mount an external antenna to a vehicle. I put a scanner on it. It's called a PC tail scanner. It's pretty much an industry standard scanner. And it's a really smart piece of equipment. I can tell it, I want you to look in these bands and scan and find me what's going on for all of the antennas, all the sectors within this frequency block. And it scans all the frequency block. It's really fast, does a lot of great work. And then I have 3 mobile phones that are sitting there, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and they're all running at the same time, and they're accessing the network doing throughput tests. So trying to get the speeds and figure out what's going on. So I'm seeing a scanner, what's going on overarching in the network, but then I'm making independent calls on all 3 networks at the same time to make sure of what I'm seeing. So those tests were performed in July 24th, 2025. It's a lot nicer that time of year than it was now. I'm used to warmer weather, so it was great. Go to the next slide. So I did a blind scan. Like I said, I told the scanner, go look. I want you to find any of the frequency blocks that are active for any of the carriers within these bands that are assigned. And that's what it did. It found them. It locked them up. I said, okay, great. Let's go scan that. And we went, I took it off and drove. So the bands and channels that are shown in the deck, I scanned low band, 700 megahertz and 850 megahertz. And I scanned mid band, which is 1900 and 2100 megahertz. Remember, the thing to remember about those two is when you're in low frequency bands, they propagate further and they do better with indoor service than the mid bands. The mid bands have a wider bandwidth, so more spectrum, more throughput, but they don't cover as far. So you have low band covering everything. You have mid band in your high capacity areas. So I had it scan all 4. Next slide. So these are all the frequency blocks, and it gets, glazing over a little bit, but there's all the mid band and low band for each of the carriers that I drove, and what that scanner looked at and what all of the channel characteristics are. You need something to make you go to sleep, read that and read all the carrier bandwidth stuff. Next slide. All right, so here's the drive test, our route overview. So this is the route I drove, all the red lines. So I drove a pretty good amount of time. Next slide. And then once again, the Verizon neighbors, and then I noted the APNs on those sites on the south. Next slide. So there's the scanner. There's the low band for Verizon. So we can see that, yeah, we're seeing in-building coverage. We're seeing in-vehicle coverage. We're seeing some outdoors coverage to the southwest along the highway. So yes, we have coverage. But once again, this is not a coverage need. It's a capacity need. It's throughput. That's what the Verizon engineer is trying to get done, is try to add in a couple more water pipes to make sure we get the throughput. So we've got decent coverage. I'm not going to say that. It could be better, especially to the northwest, but it's decent. All right, next slide. All right, this is the 2100 megahertz. Now, I told you that 2100 doesn't propagate as far. So we're going to see, instead of we're seeing green and yellow and red, and we saw in the last slide, we saw a lot of green and yellow, which was indoor and in vehicle. Now we're seeing a whole lot of outdoor and marginal, right? So midband's not propagating as far. Next slide. Here's AT&T. Go to the next slide. Here's AT&T low band. All right, so they've got a lot more in vehicle. So we see a lot more yellow. We see some more red to the northwest and to the west. So not doing quite as well as Verizon, but there's not as many sites. All right, so it's okay. We see it a little bit better to the southeast and over this way towards the east. Next slide. Okay, there's the difference. There's 2100 for AT&T, so we've got a lot more outdoor, a lot more marginal, and we're actually getting into low to no service down towards the south. Next slide. So this is T-Mobile. So we see the same three sites that I think AT&T is on, T-Mobile's on. Next slide. So we see T-Mobile. We've got a whole lot of, in vehicle, not much indoor, right? And a little bit of red for outdoor. Next slide. And then we saw a lot of 2100 megahertz. So a lot more outdoor and some marginal and low to no service. So we always get a whole lot less coverage off the 2100 megahertz midband. Next slide. We did active call testing. So that shows who's providing the level of service within the area. So that's what's going on. So the biggest one is 49% of the throughput was done by that one sector. That's that dark magenta or that light magenta. That's the one that's being offloaded, right? So it's doing a whole lot of business right now, that area, without that site. So that's the one that's got too much people trying to pull water off of it. It's not providing enough because it does such a large coverage area. So that's the one we're trying to offload. Next slide. There's the active call testing for Verizon. So there's what the mobiles were reporting, right? The mobiles are inside. I had the scanner, had the antenna on the roof. So it was getting better coverage, but the mobiles were inside, all lined up on the front dash. So active call testing is going to show a little bit worse than what we do on the scanner. So we saw a lot of outdoor and some in vehicle, not a lot of in building. Next slide. There's throughputs. We saw a variation of throughput, but we didn't really get a lot above 5 megabits per second. Once again, that's an indicator saying we're running out of gas on that channel. We're not getting enough water flow. Next slide. This is AT&T. So what sectors are providing the coverage within that area? Next slide. Call testing for AT&T. We had some indoor, some in vehicle, but a whole lot more outdoor and marginal. Next slide. There's the call testing throughputs. We got a little bit down into the 20 megabits per second down in the southeast and over to the west towards Redmond, but everywhere else we're below 5 megabits per second. Next slide. There's the T-Mobile physical cell IDs, not a lot of coverage in there. Next slide. There's the active call testing for T-Mobile, so a whole lot of outdoor and some marginal services by the phones, what they're saying the coverage is showing. Next slide. There's the throughput testing, so we're not seeing a whole lot of great stuff. We're more around 5 and 2 and dropping down into a whole lot of the less than 1 megabit per second for T-Mobile. Next slide. So the scanner recorded for everybody, as we saw. Everybody's getting not great service relative to capacity. So the coverage is there. We saw that in the Verizon. We saw green, right? We saw indoor. But once again, the main drive for this site is offload, but we saw that coverage to the northwest needs to be helped as well. And we are getting throughputs down to 500 kilobits per second, which is pretty low. So once again, the drive tests kind of show, yes, we do have a need for service, because if we interpolate the data correctly and we look at what the coverage levels are and who's providing that service and who needs to be offloaded, the drive data confirms what the models are saying. I believe that's the last page of that deck. Yeah, thank you, Lord. So that's the appendix. Hope I didn't glaze your eyes over. I stand for questions.
Any questions for Steve? Um, they're not that they're glazed, but one of the slides there, if I was understanding you correctly, were you saying that you guys can actually, if somebody's making a call, you know, you're reading their phone off the tap, I mean,
So,
for the need, I guess, maybe let me try to ask that a different way.
okay.
Because obviously there was a lot of testimony or written testimony about, is there really a need? We got service, we got this. But it sounds to me like the phones, the communication that's coming, that you guys are analyzing from not your phones even, but the other phones being used. That's what's determining it.
Yes, sir.
So you may seem like you're having,
Good service, but so there's two ways. So I gave you crowdsourced data that showed where if you have the certain app, like if you load Facebook or something, you load a thin client and that data automatically passes to the server that says, hey, I made this connection at this time and I had this level of service. There's also traffic metering and measurement data and statistical data that the performance engineers at Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T, and they look at it that daily. And that tells them what's going on for all of the mobiles in the area, not just the ones that have an app loaded, but any mobile connected to their networks. Those engineers look at that data, analyze that data, and then they put that data through a model and figure out where are we going to have problems. And they usually do this 2 and 3 years in advance because it takes a pretty good cycle time to be able to get something approved. So they have to do it in advance. And that's the data that the Verizon engineer is using, which I do not have visibility to. That is highly proprietary data. That's like you giving me access to your bank account. Ain't going to happen. So they look at that data, and that data is what they interpolate. I don't have access to that, so I have to go from an outside source, and that's why I go to the crowdsourced data, and I look at that. And then I use the dive data that I did myself, where I took my equipment out and I drove. But once again, that's just what my equipment saw.
sure.
The carrier engineer is seeing everything. That's why he or her are making those decisions.
Yeah. No, you answered my question. That's how I understood it. So
Yes, sir.
any, no?
Marlo Dill. So, on the 5 alternative sites that you had boxed,
Yes, ma'am.
is that the basic site ring that you're considering right there, or is that something different?
No, that's something different. That's where I told the model to go ahead and do extra math based on the coverage that proposed site would do. The ring itself is what the carrier engineer designs and says, after looking at all that data and doing all their analysis based on traffic metering and measurement data and say, we need something here, we need something to fix it, that engineer then designs that search ring and says, I need a site within this general area to be able to provide the offload. Because if a carrier engineer moves too far east, they're not going to offload a site to the west. They have to find the best ground to be able to fix the problem, because it's not just one little thing, it's a domino effect.
I follow you on that. Is there a slide that has that site ring?
I don't have that site ring, ma'am. That was the carrier engineer, so we'd have to go back and ask for that as additional detail.
Okay. I would be interested in seeing that site ring just to see if there's an alternative site, even if it's within the EFU zone that is on non-irrigated ground.
Okay.
Because your proposed site is on irrigated ground, correct?
That I don't know. I'm the radio engineer.
Oh,
I'm not the land use.
it is. I didn't specifically drive to this site, but I'm familiar with that area right there.
Okay.
And Kirk Giovanni, how many other people in the Powell area have you proposed this pitch to and been turned down?
That I would have to refer to my associate to answer that question.
Any other questions on the data?
Yeah, so Hunter here. Why do some of the antennas have a better coverage than others?
It comes into multiple things. So height above ground comes into play. How tall is the tower? 2 is how tall or how far above sea level is the ground below that tower. So the towers to the south are on a higher ridge, right? So they're going to propagate farther. That's great. And in the old days, when all you could do on the phone was talk, back when I started in this business 35 years ago, those tall towers on those big hills worked fine because the bandwidth required for us to talk is so much smaller than to stream a YouTube video, right? So that comes into play. The type of trees, right? Is the terrain flat? Is it terrain rolling hills, right? Is there water around? All of these things come into play on how a dipole transmits and how it covers. These are just the physical laws God came up with a long time ago, and these are the things that how electromagnetics work.
And so due to this pole wanting to be a coverage, or no, sorry, capacity, not coverage, you're trying to pick an area with the most kind of more populated. We're gonna get
So-
some span.
Yeah, so we pick an area based on two things. One is what sectors or what antennas do we have to offload from the neighboring sites? Who's the guy that's overloaded, right? Where are we seeing the problems? The second thing is we try to look and find where, well, squirrels don't use phones. People use the phones. So we have to go where the customers are, right? And that's where we end up as we have to design where the customers are actually using the phones. And then also the data showing what the coverage is, who we need to offload, and then looking at the traffic metering and measurement data to figure out the best place to put that search ring.
Kirk, again, what's your plans on going up above, like to space, or making a satellite radio and doing away with these whole poles to begin with? I mean, you know how we did away with the telephone, what's the scuttlebuttle on that?
So I get that question a lot.
I bet.
A lot. And what's really neat is I worked in satellite for about 5 years, and I was the base station engineer for the first voice over IP satellite network ever built, which was really cool. And this one big bird covered the whole United States, as well as Alaska and Hawaii and Canada. Really great, limited capacity. So remember, let's use the water analogy. We're sending a water pipe up. That water pipe's covering this whole area. Well, there's a whole lot more
Can't
phones.
put more pipes up above.
So a lot of people bring up Starlink. Starlink does a great job. Elon Musk has put a lot of birds in the air. They're low Earth orbit, LEO. I worked on a geosynchronous orbit bird, but these birds are lower and there's more capacity, but it's still limited. It's not mobile. It's more of a fixed thing, right? So you have to be outside. You have to have line of sight to that bird. And once you get mobile, you're not going to get the coverage you get. They're more of a fixed wireless type application. So I've got friends I know that they decided just to buy a boat and they just go all over the world in their boat, and they've got Starlink. That's the only thing that works for them, but they're on a small boat that's cruising the ocean. They're not moving quite at the speed as everybody going up and down that highway. Any other questions?
Sort of have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it in the analysis that you've been doing and the capacity, and I know everybody uses their cell phones constantly, no matter what they're doing or where they are. Is there a way to differentiate the need and drawdown from the transitory people, like that are just going down 126 between Prineville and Redmond? Or is that just part of the
network is built to allow anybody that has a SIM card for that network to attach. And the network's also built that even if I don't have a SIM card, let's say I didn't have a phone number in this, and I dialed 911, I can get on a Verizon network, or I can get on a T-Mobile network, an AT&T network. It doesn't matter. So there's no way to differentiate local customers to that site versus other customers. It's just availability for all. It's an equal, everybody's the same kind of thing.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Yes, sir. Sorry it took so long.
No, you're fine. Mr. Connors, was there anybody else that?
Unless you have any questions, I assume that we'll get an opportunity to develop.
Does anybody have any additional?
Did you hear my question?
Can you go ahead and come on up, though?
So just for the record, Mike Connors here on behalf of the applicant.
My question was, how many people have you approached in the Palbert area that have turned you down for alternative sites?
I don't know the answer to that question because that's something that our site acquisition consultant does. I have a feeling, given the number of people that want to testify, that will probably be leaving the record open for more opportunities, submit more evidence. least I was told that might likely be the case. And I'll make sure that I respond to that specific question as well as some of the other questions I've heard, been taking notes to
Fair
make
enough.
sure that we at least respond to your specific question.
Thank you.
But I apologize. I just don't know that because I wasn't involved.
You're the lawyer. You're supposed to.
I know.
everything.
I'm supposed to know. Everything. I just don't. Anything further?
Any other questions for Mr.? No.
Okay. Thank you very much for your patience. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, is there anybody else in the room or online that wants to speak in favor of the application? If you're online, if you can put the request in the chat, we have. McFarland. So I have Ryan McFarland, but didn't say you were neutral, favor, or against. Okay. Give me just a second and I'll. I think I'm right. And Leslie Westcott. Were you in favor? It didn't mark against, in favor, or neutral. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, were these? Yeah,
They're all of them are against, but the ones that were sideways exceeded their time.
okay, okay. Okay, just for clarification, anybody else in favor that wants to speak online? Is anybody online? Okay, is anybody want to speak that's neutral? Neither for nor against, just needs to say something online? Huh?
Chat.
Yeah, just put it, if you do, put your request in the chat. Okay, so hearing none, we will move on those in opposition. So I will call on. I was gonna call first.
May I pose a point of order here?
Sure.
Today, we have filed on behalf of the community a very technical objection that responds to everything you've heard so far.
Can you
I'm
introduce
sorry, my
yourself,
name,
please?
Yeah.
Yeah.
sorry, I apologize. My name is Annette Kaloji. I reside at 1900 Southwest Parish Lane. So on behalf of the community, we've filed a very technical response to all the points that were raised and the 3 test items that Mr. Eisler raised. Because in 3 minutes, you can't respond to all of that, most of the folks here have ceded their time to me so I can explain the objections. So therefore, I ask Planning Commission to allow more than 3 minutes so that I may explain our opposition to the points that you just heard.
Okay, I've got a lot here, so just give me a second here.
So, everyone, just a reminder, so it was 3 minutes per speaker.
Yeah.
So you'd be
And that's-
flying.
That's why I was counting
Make
up
sure.
here. So we do have, including yourself, then we would have 5, so that'd be 15 minutes. Okay. I just. Okay, but I didn't have them on here. No. So. Are you saying everybody would rather do it this way?
And-
Well, hold on. I don't want to get out of our process here. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this because so if so I've got all these then. I guess what I'm trying to determine is if you're gonna have Annette
Me to come up and see what you've got.
Yeah,
Can
because
we?
I don't
we
want to
wanna
just
take just
assume,
like
what I don't
a
want to
couple minute
happen.
break?
Yeah, we can take
Can
like
I do
a
that?
minute recess.
But
unless-
what I don't want to happen is if there's somebody else that wants to speak.
Yeah.
So give us a minute
Yes, thank you.
or two.
Do all those slips state whether or not they're here to see their time or to provide?
No, not all of them do. That's the problem.
Then
Not four.
it might make sense to have those that want to provide their own testimony to come up, and then everything remaining would be seating time.
Yeah. We find
That
out.
makes sense.
Okay, but I need to kind of know that before I call them up.
Yeah.
And Mr.
Right.
You see what I mean?
And
Is
Mr.
that what you're
Esler,
saying?
So basically, can we just hold on for a minute? So that we can all hear for just a second. Thank you. So Chair, what you could do is go ahead and call,
Okay,
Annette, correct? Has, so you could put hers to the side
Mhm.
as that is a person who is been elected to represent their opposition. And if the person would like to cede, we'll make a tally and be able to do that.
Mr. Chairman. Couldn't you
but if I may add, some of the comments that would come from the others, there's a context that I provide that makes those relevant.
Mr. Chairman.
okay, I think, hold on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call off all these names. You guys tell me if you're going to have Annette speak for you. And that's the only way I know how to do it with this
Yes.
many. Okay,
That's my suggestion.
okay. Before we do that, okay, so what, you want 5?
That would be great.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Okay, so we have a game plan here. We do have some that didn't state whether they wanted to include, have their time included in a net. So I'm just going to call. You tell me if you do, or if you'd like to speak on your own. So Jenny Hook. You don't know the question? No,
He said,
She wants to.
you want to speak? Okay. Well, the other thing we were going to do is figure out, we only have a few individuals, so we're going to do those first.
It's when you call them.
Okay, David, I'm going to butcher your last name. Okay. You knew who I was talking about. Diana Presley. Okay. Leslie Westcott. Kathleen Staterdall. Okay. Neil Henke. Okay. So we've got 2 here that we'll have, so David, I'll have you come up. Yeah.
What?
So what happened with that is that we got handed a stack of papers that said you are willing to cede your time to Annette. And I married all of those names up. And right now, your 3 minutes is now added to that total.
Yeah.
Yes, so far we have 20 of the slips. That's 60 minutes. We,
So
so that's 60 minutes time,
We ought to continue.
and I'll let the chair continue.
question.
Let's give the chair a chance to respond first.
no, it's you're either all in or out. So No, we would give the person 3 minutes to speak, okay? And if we had questions for that person, yeah, I mean, we're not gonna make them stop at 2.5 minutes so we can ask questions. So they would have their 3 minutes to speak. We would ask a question. They're more than happy to, we wanted them to answer. So, okay,
We be the
So-
commissioners.
Could you clarify that? No.
No.
Mr. Chairman, would you clarify that when questions are asked after they
Testify.
make their statements, that they may ask questions of us, but not questions of the applicant? It's not a.
well, that's, okay, I don't know if you guys heard that. So if you have questions that maybe you didn't get from the applicant's testimony, you can't specifically ask them. You ask it us, puts it on the record, and then we will make sure that we can ask that. Generally, the applicant's taking notes so they can answer those questions that come up or any kind of statements, okay? So, in their rebuttal. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go with the two I have here that wanted to do it on their own. We're gonna go till 7, so wherever we're at that point, and then we're just gonna have to continue this hearing. Well, I don't know if we'll get a date and time tonight.
January would be our next meeting,
Okay, no date yet, just,
the 14th.
okay. Okay, so David, if you want to come up. And again, just state your name and address for the record.
So my name is David Zalinardo. I live at 3690 Southwest Williams Road, which is 1,050 feet from the proposed tower. And I'm going to stick this up. Oh, sorry, this up here. I'm not a real computer genius, but it's just to show another view of the ditch rider
This is him.
features, but this one's taken right off my patio, and I did scale it to size for the distance. So anyway, there's people smarter than me. I'm a wildlife guy. So again, I'm going to go, yeah, what she said with the net. And the only thing I'd like to address on cell coverage is the Verizon application cites Williams Road as one of the areas of bad coverage. I live right there, and I've never had a drop call. I've never had trouble doing my computer, connecting my computer to my phone. So with that said, and then I'm going to go on. So what I want to do is talk to you about, and I know it's not a code criteria, but it still is an obligation of FCC and Verizon, and that's compliance with federal laws. There's the National Environmental Policy Act, there's the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and there's the Bald and Golden Eagle Act. All of those, first of all, NEPA requires the applicant to show proof that they meet FCC's criteria for not having to do additional analysis. Part of that criteria is avoidance of wetlands and special areas. The area they call Tom's Pond, which is 800 feet from the tower, we've documented over 170 species of birds on it. The typical spot, whether it's in juniper out in a pasture, you're lucky to get 25. In other words, it's an incredibly rich area, and it's home to many candidate and formally listed species like trumpeter swans, etc. So anyway, I find it hard that they can, the one thing that gets them out of NEPA is to say it's categorically excluded. And they have to do what they call a finding with no significant impact. In other words, they have to go through and say, hey, this really has little to no problem. I'm going to be really, really interested to see how they pull that off. And again, it's not Verizon, but that opens FCC to also a court suit to enjoin this. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the Bald and Golden Eagle Act both require what they call incidental take permits, which is you don't mean to kill the bird, but it dies. And it's been documented that annually about 7 million different kinds of birds are killed in collisions in these towers. So it's going to be hard to say we didn't kill anything. And matter of fact, I'll be out there looking under the tower if it's built. The Fish and Wildlife Service, with the new administration, they've weakened the take requirements for both the Bald Eagle Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. But still, the agency has published it's basically their recommendations are reasonable and prudent measures. I'm done already?
That's 3 minutes.
Okay. Can I have 2 more? Please, Anna. Anyway, they're required to, not required, they're suggested to follow these. And one of the big measures is to locate the site away from important and critical habitats, of which wetlands and the xeric environment, like we have, a really rich environment.
Okay, we are going to have to stop you. Sorry.
Okay, well, good for you. I wrote it out. So you can read it later.
And that's fine.
Okay.
Or not.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jenny. And you state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jenny Hook, and I live at 3367 Southwest Williams Road in Pal Butte.
Okay.
All right. My husband Frank and I live directly across the street from the property with the proposed cell tower. That record 217-2500293. We understand that you do not want to hear how we believe it will lower our property values, destroy pristine views, any injury or endangerment to migrating birds, raptors, wildlife, and any health issues to humans. What I will say is the land the cell tower is to be built on is an EFU property. It was just farmed this past summer. I witnessed the owner out there plowing, seeding, watering, and harvesting. To this day, you can see evidence. We have lived here since 2018, and I can remember at least 3 times, if not more, that it was farmed. Obviously, the owners did this to keep it in good standing under EFU rules. I read that Verizon stated they picked this property because they couldn't locate a good enough non-EFU site. I know there are other places this tower can be placed on. I noticed that Verizon circled an area called the shaded area. That's that southeast area. That it needs more service. Funny, that area is right about where the new solar field is. And there's a tower right across the highway on Wiley Road. They can use that tower. Pal Butte is not hurting for cell service. Verizon just wants to put a tower there so they can lease to other companies for more money at a later date. I did a bit of looking through the Crook County codes, and under the 1.2C, I think, for applying for a cell tower, one of the codes states that a balloon/crane test must be done within 2 days, but not more than 30 days from the date of the neighborhood meeting. I took pictures of a balloon that was tied to a helium cylinder in the middle of a field in question. This giant balloon, of course, caught my attention. I had no idea what it was for. This was on March 6th, 2025. We received the notice of the cell tower on either April 22nd or 23rd. I know it was like the day or two after Easter. Okay. The envelope was post-dated April 19th, 2025. The meeting didn't happen until May 4th, 2025. That is over 8 weeks before the neighborhood conference, or before the meeting. 8 weeks before the neighborhood meeting. They did not follow county code procedures. In fact, Crook County Code says the pre-application conference shall be completed prior to scheduling the neighborhood meeting or conducting the balloon crane test. When did that conference occur? In conclusion, Verizon's reasons for using the particular property are weak, and I urge the Planning Commission Board to vote no on this application. Please listen to the people that live in this good neighborhood of community of Powell Butte. I do want to add, with regard to capacity, I really do not see that Powell Butte area is going to be growing in population all that much. I mean, people drive through it, but we're really not growing in that area where they're predicting, because we all love our 40-acre properties, our 25-acre properties. Anyway, that was it. And I also want to let you know that I agree with Annette and Kaloji's objections. And thank you for
Okay.
your time.
Thanks. And we do have that in the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to still tell you.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so those were the two. So Annette. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there anybody online? If so, put the request in the chat. No? Okay. So just again, state your name and address for the record.
Annette Kaloji. I reside at 1900 Southwest Parish Lane. And I think I'm an interested party because I would look out my front window and see that tower every single day. First of all, thank you for your patience. I'm sorry about the hassle of going through this, but as you can see, there's a lot of responsibility here to be able to respond to this in the right way for all the people in this community. And we appreciate you letting us do that. And I'll start out by saying that we filed a very detailed technical report. Every issue that you've heard talked about today is addressed in that report. Because we do want to get to sleep tonight, I won't address every issue, but I want to bring up some points that I would like the Planning Commission to consider. But please know that everyone here requests that you read carefully what we've submitted, because in the end, Mr. Kennedy spoke very eloquently and he spoke very persuasively. But in the end, what the Planning Commission in this county must rule on is the credibility of the data that's been presented. And in our objection, we have the reports of two experts who, for reasons I'll talk about, call into question the credibility of that data. There's nothing personal about Mr. Kennedy or anyone on the Verizon side. There's nothing personal here. It's personal for the people here who will have to look at the tower. But what I say and what's in our report is not personal, but it does point out the insufficiencies, the inaccuracies, and the incompleteness of that data. And we do that because you will have to decide which data is credible. And we believe if you take the time to look at the reports and look at the objections, you will find that the data does not support the burden that Verizon has in this case. And let me get specifically to that. And please, when I say Verizon, there are two applicants. We know that there's Verizon Towers and there's Harmony Towers, who are the co-applicants. But just for ease of use, if I refer to Verizon, it refers to both of them. I have to start out by saying two technical things. One is, Mr. Eisler pointed out that reduced value of land and visual aesthetics are not part of the criteria. And Mr. Connor, the attorney, showed that in his slides. But we must object to the fact that he then offered his oral testimony in this case and presented evidence when he said, there's no evidence in the record to support a diminution value, and personally, I've seen that there isn't one. We contend that statement now opens the door for people to submit evidence on that because he submitted the evidence. He also said that in his personal opinion, the view isn't as bad as the people will hear say. He submitted evidence about the visual aesthetics of the tower, and that should allow these people to respond. So we object to those statements, and we ask that the record be allowed for these people to submit evidence to contradict that. That was an improper amount of testimony based on those criteria, and they should be able to respond. Now, before I talk about the substance of the application, there are a couple of legal points that I really want to make that are major. These are not just mere formalities. They are points that go to the very validity of the application. The first one is this: the property owner, the owner of record, did not submit the application. The owner of record is Alexander Ranches LLC. The property was deeded to them by Thomas Alexander in November of 2024. That's not just a technicality. Thomas Alexander and Alexander Ranches LLC are not the same. And this is not insignificant because the LLC, the reason people do it is it conveys certain protections by an individual, and it also requires certain requirements and has certain consequences. LLCs are allowed to operate under activities defined in the formal agreements they have. So not only is the owner not a part of the application, but we would contend that the property owner, the LLC, does not have the legal authority and never had the legal authority to put a lease on for a cell tower on that land. And here's why. The legal authority was set out for the LLC to, according to the records that we have before us, to conduct hay and cattle sales and land leasing and engage in all activities incident thereto. Land leasing and activities incident to hay and cattle sales. And that definition of their business activities has been around since 2022 in the records of the Secretary of State that are part of our objection. 2022, we presume, was long before Verizon was a twinkle in anyone's eyes. That land, or that legal description means, if we're right, that there is no valid lease on that land because the LLC did not have authority to grant the lease. In addition, the landowner, the LLC, did not sign a form authorizing ACOM to represent it. Thomas Alexander did. So, in effect, ACOM doesn't have the legal authorization of the forms that are required under the county, in the county records, to represent and be present and present on the application. There's also not a document in the file that shows ACOM represents Harmony Towers. There is an agency agreement between ACOM and Verizon, but not between ACOM and Harmony Towers. And almost more importantly, the entity that signed the purported lease is PI Tower Development. That's the name in the memorandum of lease. PI Tower Development shows up nowhere in the application. There's absolutely no indication that the party that has the lease for that land is participating in this application. So that's important, and we have pointed out that we object to the fact that the applicants did not submit the required documents in this case. They didn't submit the operating agreement of the LLC as they were required to. They did not submit an executed copy of the lease as they were required to. They submitted only a memorandum of lease. And they were also required to show who are authorized signers for the LLC. None of that was done. What that means is, and the reason we object is because neither the county nor any of us can evaluate whether or not there's a proper lease for a cell tower on the subject property. Now, if I may go to the merits of the case. First of all, it's important to understand that it is a false choice to say we either have to have this tower on EFU exclusive farmland or we don't get good service, good capacity, we don't have emergency service. That's a false choice. The community here isn't saying we don't want all those things or need all those things. They're saying that this is not the proper location under the code. And Mr. Eisler described how the Oregon statutes solve this problem because there are two competing priorities. One is adequate cell coverage for all of us. We all want good cell coverage. The second is the important priority recognized in Oregon of protecting precious farmland. That balance was struck by the Oregon legislature in ORS 215-275, And the Oregon legislature tells us exactly how the law is to be applied. This commission in the county doesn't have the right to strike the balance. It already exists in the law. And the balance is this. If there is non-EFU land that can feasibly serve the public service objectives identified by Verizon, that land must be used. And that is true under the case law and the Oregon statute, that the non-EFU land must be used even if it's more expensive to put the tower there. It's true that you have to use that EFU land even if the cell company has to change its design to put the tower there. That's the Sprint case. And it's true even if the EFU land is the best location for that tower. That's true under the Harshman case. You've heard Mr. Kennedy say these are the optimal sites, these are the best sites. That isn't the standard, and it's error if this county rules that that's the standard. It's not that that's the best site. It's that no non-EFU site can technically, feasibly serve the public service needs identified by Verizon. So we have the requirements, as you said, of the need to provide a public service, and that this utility facility can only be put on non-EFU land. So we ask the county to understand the burden is on Verizon. It's not on the county and it's not on the community to show that these non-EFU sites will work. The burden is on Verizon to show they technically can't. And that's really important. So let's talk about what a reality that we all appreciate. If Verizon had to put this on non-EFU land, almost certainly, because of the code, if the tower's above 30 feet, they'd have to go through a conditional use permit. Those are much tougher standards. If they had to file a CUP, the county would get to, the residents would get to talk about things like diminution of value of their land and their aesthetic views being impaired. They'd have to do that if there's a CUP. Of course, Verizon would rather have this on EFU land because that means they just go through the site plan review and the challenges we can raise are much more limited. But that's also why the balance is struck. They're only supposed to do that and go through the site plan review, lesser standards, if there isn't available non-EFU land. So let's talk about that. First of all, let's do the other one. Sorry. Over and over again, you've heard about capacity. You've heard both speakers, and we'll tell you more about the issue. And this is in our objection. The issue is capacity, capacity, capacity. Actually, I'm lying. The other one. Sorry. So you've heard Mr. Kennedy say Verizon has proprietary information, and he doesn't have access to it. That's really important because this is from Verizon's internal RF engineer, the one who has that data. This is his map of Powell Butte and the coverage. Here's the proposed site. Here's Powell Butte South. And what you'll see, and what we must take his word for, is that overall, the signal strength in all of Powell Butte is good to excellent. Mr. Connor told you that green is what we're looking for. Green on Mr. Kennedy's maps is negative 85 dBms. I'm sorry, it's how they assess signal. It's kind of like your golf game. The lower the number, the better the signal. Negative 75 is better than negative 85. Negative 85 is better than negative 95. If you look at here, I'm hoping it's not meant to be misleading, but yellow on this map is excellent. It's negative 85. It's the green that Mr. Connor and Mr. Kennedy talked about. This is the existing coverage. It's all negative 85. What they propose to do, they say, is already being done. The red isn't bad in this view. It's bad in Mr. Kennedy's, but it's great in this. It's negative 75. That's knocking it out of the park. So what this shows is that the signal strength is good to excellent. That's Mr. Ferguson's answer. And it's what all these people support when they say their signal is fine. But he goes further. He said this design would work just fine except for one thing. That's the capacity of the Powell Butte South Tower. And I'll show you exactly where it is. It's close to Brasada Ranch. This design, the public service that's required is not this coverage. He tells us it's the capacity of this tower. And he says one other thing. The tower that Verizon calls the Wiley Tower on the top of Powell Butte has, quote, plenty of capacity and is not the driver of this application. So what we know from Verizon's own engineer and his own internal data, the coverage map that he shows is exactly the map that Mr. Kennedy says they're aiming for with the proposed site. It already exists. The problem, the public service that's needed under the code is capacity for the Powell Butte South Tower. Capacity meaning we've got to set up a tower that takes some of the load off so there's enough capacity. This is Powell Butte South, the tower. Brasada Ranch is here. It's on the north side, the west side of part of the hill of one of the Powell Buttes. Here's the Powell Butte South Tower. Here's the proposed site, 5.85 miles away. And here in orange, and this is in our objection, are the 5 alternate sites of Verizon. What we show in this is all of the alternate sites around the problem area that are non-EFU. Verizon needs a 50 by 50 piece of land. There are 10 square miles of non-EFU land that could be used. And some of them, a very short distance from the tower they're trying to add capacity to. So this is where they show their search ring. This is where the search ring should have been. And we outline that ring in our documents. If they used that search ring, here's a picture of the Powell Butte South Tower. It's hard to see. I almost couldn't find it. That tower is at 3,600 feet. The alternate H site I showed you is on a hill to the southeast of that, facing Brasada, that's 300 feet taller, non-EFU. That site could hide a tower just like that, and it wouldn't have to be 150 feet. It could be 30 feet. This site is 300 feet taller than the Powell Butte South site, and it's 600 feet taller, or higher in elevation, excuse me, than the proposed site. So when they say they have to put a tower 5.85 miles to the north of the problem they're trying to solve, we find that not credible, and our experts in their report tells you that's not credible. So we've seen what the coverage area is. We've seen the current coverage that shows, and the statement by the Verizon engineer that says this plan works fine, except for that one tower. So why would they put it 5.85 miles north? In the application, Verizon has said that they would co-locate other cell companies' antennas on their tower. They'd sell space. And a tower in the middle of flat land, in the middle of Powell Butte, would be a pretty good site for that. So now let's talk about the application in more depth. Again, if they take farmland, if they want to take exclusive farmland, they have to prove that it's necessary that the tower be there. So the factors that Mr. Kennedy testified to that make the proposed site a good site, our engineers will say those same factors make all of the alternate sites good sites. It's not just that this is a magic tower. All of the things that allow this site to provide coverage and offload for all of those technical factors exist for the other sites. And our experts will explain that to you. One of them has 40 years experience in the RF field. The other is a professor of applied physics and engineering who has 40 years of experience. And this is what they say when responding to the conclusion by Mr. Kennedy that no other site will work. One of them says, Mr. Scheinfein, or Dr. Scheinfein, based on the entirety of the information presented and the amount of information that is not included in the proposal, it is a technically unreasonable conclusion to make that none of the alternate sites are feasible options for meeting the objectives submitted by Verizon. The RF engineer with 40 years experience says, in summary, the conclusions that none of the alternate sites are feasible is incorrect based on the presented data. And I'm not just giving you bald statements here. All of that is supported by calculations and analysis in the objection. So this is the proposed site. At the corner of Wiley and Highway 126 is what's called the Sprint Tower. It's alternate site number 1. So let's talk about just that one example right now. The Sprint Tower is on land 270 feet higher in elevation than the proposed tower. And Verizon says its antennas could be at 180 feet, not 150. So that makes the antennas that could be on the Sprint Tower 302 feet taller than they could be on the proposed land. Mr. Kennedy says he rejects that tower because, one, it doesn't provide the same level of service as proposed, and two, doesn't offload the Wiley Tower on top of Powell Butte and the Powell Butte South Tower. That's on page 117 of his conclusions that he showed. Let's start with number 2, that it doesn't offload the site the way it should. The Verizon engineer, when looking at the proposed tower, the site of the proposed tower on EFU land, says it would provide, quote, significant offload to the tower on top of Grizzly Mountain, 11 miles away. That tower, the proposed tower, could provide offload and add capacity to the tower on Grizzly Mountain, 11 miles away. But the Bewabco's report says that the Sprint Tower, which is 302 feet taller, can't offload the 2 towers that exist for Verizon that are 4.6 miles away and 6.6 miles away. Again, I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but there must be something magic about that proposed tower. But Mr. Kennedy provides no, and I do mean no, data supporting that analysis. And it doesn't take an expert to say that doesn't make very much sense. Now, as for the reason that the Sprint Tower is rejected because it doesn't provide the, quote, same level of service, that's what his report says, end quote. We know that's not the requirement. It doesn't have to provide the same level of service. It has to be adequate, feasible, technically feasible to provide the service to meet the objectives. Those objectives are better coverage. That's what they say, expanding coverage. We were shown twice, expanding coverage and improving capacity. The documents show that that's exactly what the Sprint Tower can do. In fact, in some cases, when you look at the map that Mr. Kennedy provides, it provides better coverage than the proposed tower. But here is the other interesting flaw in the analysis, or the conclusions, I should say, in the Bewabco's report. In the Bewabco's report, he shows that green area, those green lobes from the proposed tower that represent negative 85 decibel milliwatts, 85 dBm indoor coverage, the green. In his maps, it shows the green from the proposed towers extend 3.61 miles. In the map he shows for alternate 1, a tower 302 feet taller, that same green area only goes 2.25 miles. It doesn't take an expert to know there's something wrong with that calculation. But we have two experts that will tell you why there's something wrong with that calculation. And again, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but it isn't a magic tower on the EFU land. You saw where he said some of the sites were too close to the proposed site. Some of the alternate non-EFU sites were excluded by him because they're too close. The Verizon engineer contradicts that. He says, Mr. Ferguson, in his report, when you put the tower at the proposed site, there would be interference, so you'd have to optimize all of the towers around it. You'd have to turn down some and turn up some. Mr. Kennedy doesn't say why that can't happen with towers on non-EFU sites. If you can optimize the coverage for the tower on the EFU site, you can optimize it for towers on the non-EFU site. Again, I'm not meaning to be, I'm not meaning to make this personally. I'm just trying to establish what our experts conclude, which is this isn't a reasonable, credible analysis. And let me explain one more thing. Verizon at one point must have thought the Sprint tower was a good alternative, because in 2015, Verizon applied for and received a permit to put its antennas on the Sprint tower. It could have done that in 2015. That application was granted, and they never put them on the tower. So here's my last point. To show that they meet the burden of establishing, proving they can't either use existing towers or non-EFU land, Verizon can submit these reports. And then it falls on people in the community to bring it to your attention if they're not adequate. That's a lot to do. But our objection and our experts explain why that's the case here. It's not personal, but the information is incomplete, it's inaccurate, and it's self-contradictory. And here's how you know. If you look at the at the current coverage from the Verizon engineer, and you compare it to the current coverage of the Boabkos report, if you use the right scales, they change their colors, but if you use the right scales, there is no, and I mean no, commonality of the signal strength between those two maps. None. They're completely different. And it's exactly the same for the map that the Verizon engineer puts forward as to the proposed coverage, how things would be improved, versus the proposed coverage of Mr. Kennedy. Those maps aren't the same. There's nothing the same in them. One or both of those engineers have to be wrong. One or both of those have to have submitted evidence that isn't correct. And let's put it this way. Let's say you have an expert mechanic who tells you that pickup truck is a Chevy, and you have another expert mechanic who tells you that pickup truck is a Ford. One of those two guys is women, isn't right. And maybe they both aren't. But here's the thing. If you're looking for advice about buying a new truck, you probably want to go to a different expert. We give you two of them. And for these reasons, our engineer doesn't write lightly when he says that the Boabkos reports, Mr. Kennedy's reports, simply do not meet generally accepted engineering standards. They sound good, they look good, they just don't meet those standards. If the credibility of the reports supporting Verizon's application are undermined, then the case law says the county cannot properly rely on them. It would be error. There's a case we cite in our objection to ODOT. If this commission and this county finds that the evidence and the objections we have submitted undermines the credibility of those reports, which do not have supporting data, they have the conclusions of the engineer, then it would be error for the county to rely on those reports and grant the Verizon application. Now, Verizon will have a chance under the rules to respond, and that's fair. We play by the rules, We ask that you apply the rules to them. So they'll have a chance to respond. But I'll end by saying this. There's much more in the objection we hope you study, but no engineering report they can submit, no piece of data they submit can change the elevation of the land. That tower on the proposed site is going to be lower in elevation than all the alternative sites, no matter what their engineer says. No information they can present, no engineering report they can present is going to change the fact that a significant portion of the land they draw in their circle is uninhabited. It's BLM land. It's land owned by Full Health LLC that is undeveloped, and it's land in the north that has no users on it. No engineering report can change that. And commissioners, I would contend there cannot be a public service need where there's no public. And lastly, no engineering report can change the laws of physics. These towers that we're proposing and the 10 square miles of non-EFU land are simply taller. They have the ability to meet the coverage and capacity requirements that Verizon has stated. So because there are flaws in the application Verizon can't fix, in reality, that's because there are non-EFU areas that can support this tower and meet the objectives. Because of that, we would say that the county should reject the application outright. And we would tell you, in conclusion, that there are sites on the north side that are non-EFU sites of Powell Butte that are 1,100 feet and 600 feet higher in elevation that are non-EFU that could serve the purposes and not be a visual problem. The site, the alternate H site, those are sites, alternates A and B. The alternate H site could provide a solution. And I point these out because I think that members of the community wouldn't oppose those sites. So it is a big responsibility to represent the community, and I appreciate their confidence and their support. And I would ask, please, that the commission carefully consider all of the evidence and carefully assess the credibility of the evidence presented by all the parties, and that you consider, and that you, frankly, you deny the application outright. Thank you.
Hold on.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is it Colodis?
I'm so-
Your name, is it Colodis?
Kaloji.
Kaluji, okay. Sorry. You're talking about our report and you've submitted a report?
Yes,
to-
we filed an objection today. Yes.
Okay.
With
Sorry, when?
That has, I'm sorry, we filed the objection
Oh,
today that
okay.
has the expert
Okay,
reports.
that's-
I
I was, you
apologize.
kept referencing that, and I think we were all wondering where.
I'm sorry.
Um,
I apologize.
So my question then is, I guess, to staff, does this report then get to be presented to the applicant for rebuttal purposes?
Well, it will be in it'll be in, obviously, within all the documentation, the staff report. I think at this point, we would have the applicant come up and rebuttal.
now?
However, they're gonna need to be able to review that. as
Yeah,
well. I mean, I understand what you're saying.
yeah, to
And
be fair.
well, let me see if there's any other questions for Annette before we.
Thank you. So, George. Annette, I think you said it, but I'm not sure. So if this tower if they withdrew the application, submitted another one on non-EFU land, then the community would support that?
Oh, no, I don't want to speak for that. No. I have to live with these people. No, I'm saying that there are sites that would be on the side of hills, not in the middle of farmland, on the side of hills. There's a picture
Right.
and an objection of, you can't even, honestly, it's hard to see Powell Butte South. I'm just saying there are sites where a lower tower could be built that I think people would not have as a visual, an objection on on the visual aesthetics of that tower. But they may. I'm just saying.
Okay.
I'm
Thank
just
you.
saying that. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Annette.
I need a review.
so at this time, I'd have the applicant come up. And staff, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on what I'm about to say. I'll say it first and then you can tell me. I don't know if we want to give them the option to wait to do any rebuttal until you've been able to review this. Or if you'd like, you guys give me some direction too here because he may want to review it first.
Do you want me to comment on that first or staff?
He can comment on his opinion.
What I don't want to happen is this to be your only opportunity to rebut.
And that he always has a chance to keep the record open. He has.
Yes,
days.
okay. So,
Appreciate that, Chair Warren. Again, for the record, Mike Connors here on behalf of the applicant. Yes, that's what I was going to suggest. We're 10 minutes till 7. There's been a lot of new information that's been submitted into the record. Appreciate the oral explanation. That was helpful. But we're not in a position to respond to documents that we haven't seen. We haven't seen any of this. We weren't provided a copy. I had learned that it was submitted today at the hearing, but staff didn't have an opportunity to provide a copy. So as Mr. Eisler indicated, we as an applicant have the right to request that the record be left open or that a continuance to a new hearing date. We talked about a January 14 date. I guess we would propose that we do a continuance and then we can use that time to review the information that's been presented and provide some response to the commission. So you have our position on those issues.
okay. And that's what that's what we would end up asking if there's a request to continue the hearing. So,
Can we request other information? Are we
Yeah.
leaving the record open?
well, I think we would do that with staff and then let staff, yeah. Okay, so let's do that. And then, some of us have questions for staff, maybe for additional information. Is that you want us to?
Ask you or ask him?
What type of questions? They're procedural questions. If they're substantive, I'm in the same boat as he has. We didn't get a chance to see any of the documents were presented.
I don't think it'd be any,
I think it's more parallel. So Marlo brought up a good question about asking for the data from Verizon about their circle of coverage or whatever, yeah. So I think that's one of the items. I think that having that direct study is helpful. I'm also curious about the impact of cost versus EFU versus non-EFU. Like, how is that impacting this decision and who gets to make that decision? If that's a direct bottom line thing and it really, if that doesn't really pencil its way into what the community thinks, I don't think that there's enough value put on what the community thinks versus the bottom line of things. So I kind of that should come to the surface, I think. And then obviously, there is a different time period for permit versus conditional use based on the land that it's going on. I think that we need to look at that as a whole, to have a better understanding of, the big picture, and then again, how that's going to affect the community. And then at what point, there was discussion from your professional and throughout different presentations. If you have a site that is 10% less efficient versus a site that's 10% more efficient, what's the cost of this one versus this one, and who gets to finally make that decision? And then how does that weigh in on the community? And those are that's kind of where I'm at with it.
It's helpful. I appreciate you providing that list. Definitely, I wrote them all down and we'll make sure that we address that more.
One other question, you brought it up, as far as on that piece of ground,
Right.
we see the dot and all that.
Mhm.
Obviously, that piece of ground it's farmable, but there's some part they're not. Is there any way to have a map showing exactly where that would be?
where the farming area is.
No, well, where this 50 by 50 footprint would be.
Yes.
On that parcel. I don't know if you guys have went that far.
We did, but we will highlight that information when we provide some
Okay.
responses.
Is it okay to ask him for that?
I think that's critical for anywhere you're going to put it. It is to
Yep.
show, if it's going to go on EFU and it's farmable land, obviously there's places that aren't being farmed for whatever reason. Maybe it's a slope, maybe it's rocky ground, maybe it's not useful. I think that also helps to inform the community about a property's choice.
Understood.
And if I remember correctly, there's a pond located pretty close. Would we be subject to an ODFW migratory bird? Just kind of analysis on it. Just curious. That's in the realm. Yeah. Looked like it.
Any other questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to kind of go through that list. That's really helpful for us because we heard from the community, but obviously we also want to know what's on your mind. So we'll be preparing our responses to get you these answers.
Okay. And so for staff, is there anything else you needed from us now that we know that they were doing the continuance? We're going to set it at that time date. Okay. So it'll be January 14th.
And we're gonna leave-
2026?
We're going to leave the record open, right?
Continue the hearing and leave the record.
It's just, yeah, it's a continuation of where we are right now. Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
You need a motion for that. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would, oh, go
Oh.
ahead. No,
We can't, and I'm sorry, but in this kind of proceeding, we just can't, we can't, is it a procedural question?
About the next meeting and what I can, is there if I were able to get the figure for everyone involved that is.
I'm not going to give any direction on that. What I can tell you is procedurally, the next hearing will be continued on January 14th. Okay, as George stated, the record's open. Things can be submitted.
For anyone on the list that I can contact about.
oh, no.
No,
Oh,
no,
no.
you can talk to planning. Not that we don't want to talk to you, but don't call us, we'll call you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we leave this, do we need the number? Application 217-25-000293 PLNG, leave the public portion open. And continue it to a date and time certain of January 14th at 4 p.m. here.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second by Monty. Any other discussion? The discussion I guess I have, are all of you available on the 14th?
So.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Monty seconded it. Anything else you need on that? Is that good? Okay. All right. Again,
2 minutes to spare.
appreciate everybody's cooperation. I do appreciate the audience letting people talk. That's really important so we can hear everybody. We have updates.
But kind of people shuffle out for a second before I.
Hey, and if you guys could, we still have to finish our regular part of the meeting, so if you want to talk, if you can just leave, no,
Take it out.
Sit in my lobby.
the lobby.
Well, good enough. So updates will be brief. We just met a week ago. We did today formally opt out of that new Eastern Oregon solar siting rule at the Board of Commissioners hearing. And so as stated last time, the plan now is to move forward with that grant and update our Go 5 inventory and go through the abbreviated process.
Yeah.
People, please go out. We can't hear.
Again about the grant 5 moving forward. What's that, John?
Yeah, Kurt wasn't here.
I'm sorry, Kurt. So we applied for a DLCD technical assistance grant for $75,000 to help update our Goal 5 inventory and to go through this new Eastern Oregon solar siting rule process to develop our own program. And we were selected to be a grant recipient. So yeah, it's very exciting because a lot of our maps, a lot of our data is 50 years old and does not reflect modern circumstances. And with this new path, it will give the county and the public a lot of discretion kind of on how to move forward with these new rules for solar. So we can kind of, there'll be a fast track system set up where for the chosen sites and the chosen areas where we deem solar to be in the best possible spot, they can have an easier path to permitting. But otherwise it'll be a tougher road. So I'm very excited about that. And like I said, we opted out because otherwise, as of January 1st, we would have been subject to these new rules without our own real input. And so it was important that we opted out before the calendar flipped. We still have some people here, a planning commission vacancy open for anybody here who wants to be up there with everybody else. We're accepting applications. I forget the end.
You should have announced that earlier.
I know, well, yeah, the captive audience. Tomorrow's the last day?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so I'm excited to see our applications there. What other updates? My brain is.
So before the January 14th, before we do the public hearing, that is our first meeting of 2026, and we'll want to do elections for the chair and vice chair for the upcoming year. So prior to reopening the continuation, we'll just want to make sure to go through that. And then we can do the other housekeeping items later in the month. Was it the 28th, I think, is the second meeting, the 14th and the 28th. So our work plan, those upcoming items. And then we'll take the code amendments and the recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners in January for the first of 2 hearings. And we have Hidden Canyon destination phase 1 will be scheduled. It's probably end of February, March, first part of March for that tentative phase 1.
Katie, is that the
Yes.
one out towards Alfalfa?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We received another aggregate application with 2 aggregate application with code amendment with comp plan amendments. Yeah. So we're going to have a really, are they existing? They have the comp plan. So we're going to have a nice, a busy spring.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying.
But you get to enjoy your holidays.
Yes.
I have a procedural question on the continuance because we've done a lot of the 777 and the deliberation. Would this primarily be same type of format to where you guys would cover the staff report first of any new, we go to the applicant agency, blah, 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 blah.
So
Down the
it's
line?
not de novo. We're not starting fresh, but we're basically stacking on. But yeah, it's the same. It'll be the same process.
Okay.
And
And-
it's still open for public comment. I mean, they can just
Yeah.
submit whatever they. want
100%,
to
yeah.
submit. Yeah.
Yeah. So testimony and comment is received up until you close the hearing. So hearing's open
Mhm.
and it's continued to be open. So they can come at the hearing and still present testimony and still present information.
I would say too, I do like it all in one PDF.
Ooh.
No.
We can discuss that. If you want to talk about
Well, yeah,
Nothing.
I find it, the way I process that information and annotate stuff, it's more difficult when it's in one big chunk
Is it?
for me. So then I have another request. If we have two hearings, can we have like separate folders for all the documents for one hearing and all the documents for another, as opposed to having it in one big continuous list?
Or broken out by the application?
Yeah, my only other suggestion would be, if the technical folks, your IT folks could come up with a way to just have a table of the documents and then a checkbox for downloading, and then hit continue and download.
It's in the packet to download each PDF individually. Unless you hit print and just print those pages.
Right.
PDF over and over again.
Yeah, just for example, the bookmarking stuff, I do bookmarks too.
It's user friendly, but that's one way.
Okay.
We are this was a countywide decision to switch to this software provider. And so we are at the mercy of what they're capable of. But they are working for us under this contract. And so if you have specific suggestions, we can put those down. And
What about, because obviously today, as you get, so like for me, I download it, so I have it here, not, can it be a link though? That,
The heck?
can it be a link that if you have that link, you click on that link and regardless of what you've added, it's current right then. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you have
As we get new exhibits, it's continually updating that packet. So when you go back to that meeting page, that packet's gonna be accurate every time. Is that what you're at?
no, like Dropbox, okay? You have a Dropbox link.
So, yes, did talk to IT about, there is. How do I explain this?
This is extraordinary, this particular one, of course.
yeah, it's good though, because it shows the flaws in our.
Expedience, he just said, if we could give him a 600-page description.
Maybe in January, I might be able to get our IT person, Chelsea, that's been working on this with me to come and help explain this to you better than I can. But the software that we're using does have there's a public portal, there's a staff portal, and then there's a commissioner portal. So at some point, there is a portal that you guys can log into. It's a whole nother things you have to know how to use, but it sounded like you can maybe use individual CDS a little bit more with that, and then you can also take notes that are personal, internal only in that.
So any comments we have should go to Hannah?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great.
John, do we have opportunity to have what you presented to us today so we can go over it again? Because it was kind of like, or is that been emailed to us?
My PowerPoint?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it'd be important if I could.
We can definitely put that into the
process.
Yeah. Yeah, I went through it fast and it was just to tee things up. But yeah, certainly that can be part of
And
it.
does their little PowerPoint get put in the?
Yeah.
It was?
Is.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
You're gonna have a lot more substance to chew on the
it
next
was really
year.
throwing me off and she kept referencing, like, man, I read a lot and I didn't see your little maps and your little, but that's okay. It just.
Mhm.
Okay, anything else?
Happy holidays.
Oh, okay.
It'll be Christmas time before we know it.
Chair, move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You guys have a great Christmas.